So thank you very much for allowing this opportunity to speak to you. I felt that it was really important that you heard from residents of Banks Peninsula as well as organisations. So what I'm presenting now is very much my personal submission. You've seen me here in front of you a number of times as the manager of the Rod Donald Trust. I've lived for 25 years in the Aotearoa Harbour area. I've been very involved with heritage protection, with the district plan over the years. I run a tourism business focused on guiding people around Aotearoa, and I also run a consulting business looking at tourism issues. So my view is that you've got a really tough job here. You're trying to fit a huge round peg into a square hole. And so, well, small in terms of physical location. But you also have a wonderful opportunity on Banks Peninsula if you manage it well. And I think this is where it's really important to have a voice from that peninsula. So what I'm asking you to do is actually strengthen the peninsula voice, because it's really important that we retain our distinct identity of our communities on Banks Peninsula, that we develop sustainable tourism, and that we harness that desire of peninsular communities to be self-determined. And so I'm looking to you to empower and strengthen our community boards as well as retain the Banks Peninsula Ward. And I think if you do this, you'll end up with a more effective and cheaper to run Banks Peninsula. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about identity and what it feels like to be a peninsula resident at the moment. And that is that our identity is being lost in this urban-driven one-size-fits-all model. And the district plan has been a real classic case of that, where we had the Banks Peninsula District Plan that people worked on for a very long time, went through all sorts of negotiations and appeals and all the rest of it. Most of the, or many of the Banks Peninsula Plan provisions were not carried over into the proposed district plan. It's been an enormous amount of work for us as submitters to try and inch them back in again. So our historic area was left out, our environmental compensation that we'd worked on was left out. Why did that need to happen? It's an example of where we need our different issues to be really clearly identified. The proposed freedom camping bylaw, I have to say, I think was a real shocker, really failing to consider rural residents and really failing to consider our tangata whenua. So it's another example where, yet again, we've had to make strong submissions to try and get our voice heard. And then there's this vexing issue over signage. I mean, somewhere like Aotearoa really trades on its charm and its unique identity. See that sign there? Tourists are always taking pictures of those cute little street signs in Aotearoa, but we're kind of being forced down this path of these standardised corporate signs from Christchurch City Council, and that's not what we want in our communities. We want to retain our separate identity. And I also am bringing up tourism because that was a slide that I brought up after Simon had finished talking, but was identified in the Rod Donald Trust submission, which I'm trying not to repeat, was that the Local Government Commission had really seen tourism as the thing that was going to bind the city to the peninsula. But in fact, the issues for tourism, a bit like the issues for the port, can be very different from your perspective as whether you're in the city or actually in the host community. So cruise tourism is an interesting example. 5 years on, it's still trading in Aotearoa as an event under event management plans. So where, for example, our school has been required to build this extensive off-street bus park, cutting down the beautiful cherry trees that screened the children from the road, the cruise ship buses now all park right alongside the school as they marshal up. So every morning on a cruise day, our children are subjected to a stream of 20 or 30 buses parking outside their school. That's an example of where tourism may be benefiting the Christchurch district or region as a whole, but it's not necessarily benefiting those residents. And I think the current tourism model is costing us livelihoods. It's very easy to think all is well in the tourism in Aotearoa, but I've been looking at it recently. All our principal bed and breakfasts have closed on the main part of Aotearoa. We have a whole street, Rouge Allée, where all the businesses have shut, and some of our principal businesses like the bakery remain closed. So I don't think all is well with tourism in Aotearoa, and we need that to be picked up and represented. And then I think there's also this real difference in that Peninsula people want to be self-determining. We want to run our reserves. We want to have reserve management committees. We want to get stuck in and do stuff like working in our reserve, fixing our wharves. But, you know, right now with wharf restoration, we came and gave submissions to you in the long-term plan. You have assisted us from the council to say, yes, we want to help you with that, but it's stuck at the moment. We're needing Andrew as our councillor to be that strong voice and push forward our wharf restoration community projects. Local maintenance contracts, that's something Andrew's driven forward. People in Akaroa are tired of vans coming over the hill endlessly from city. You know, we want those contracts being let locally, and I think, again, Andrew's been able to push for that. And we also want appropriate scale solutions with local input. So we don't need gold-plated things like Stanley Park. We don't need hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on things. Come and talk to us. We can help you to do these things far more cost-effectively through keeping it simple and doing our working bees and doing our local input and harnessing our local desire to be involved. So we're looking for more empowered local communities as being more effective for the council. And I think there's a real difference when you live on a place like Banks Peninsula. We focus on our communities. Boy, I mean, you know, Maori talk about my hill, my water. We live that, you know, we live surrounded by our hills and our water. So like Tangata Whenua, we're really connected to the land we live in, and we're really committed to making it a better place. So if we lose our Banks Peninsula councillor, and we have this poor run-around councillor who's going to manage a city ward, Sumner, Mount Pleasant, Heathcote, and then have to come all the way out to Akaroa or, heaven forbid, Le Bons Bay or Henawai Reserve. How is that person going to get around and manage it? And we're actually not going to have that voice that we've had in Andrew supporting our local initiatives. So please, we're asking, use the isolated community provisions of the Local Government Act to retain the existing Banks Peninsula ward boundary and give more power to our community board to get on and contract out work and get things going locally. I mean, under Banks Peninsula, we used to have the reserves fund that was managed by the local community boards. Let's see something like that happening again. And let us have a Peninsula councillor around the table. There he is again, the wonderful Andrew. So that our issues and opportunities can be driven forward. And I think we'll get a win-win situation out of this. So yes, please, one extra councillor for Banks Peninsula, save you money, and much better for Banks Peninsula itself. So that's...
Yeah, no, thanks very much. I think that what's been really useful about your submission and the one before it has been to really drive up the issues around why Littleton is included in the peninsula. To be honest, I thought it was just about numbers, but I can hear that it's actually about a lot more than just the numbers. And that's certainly given me some reason just to reinforce the request that we've already made. Tim?
Just two quick ones. With regards to the slides, with regards to the tourism issues, are the cruise ships actually wanted in Akaroa?
Well, I think it's an issue on which our community is divided, and there are two views, and you know, you have some businesses benefiting and you have other businesses not benefiting, but I think my view, and I'm a business who does do tours for cruise ship passengers, so I am involved with the cruise industry, but my overall view is basically it's mass tourism that's arrived in Akaroa out of the blue, and the scale of community that we are doesn't really suit mass tourism. We need to be in that sweet spot of owner-operated small business tourism with people coming and staying in our community for a while and doing the walks and appreciating the biodiversity and going to the museums and spending their time there. And I think it would be better if the cruise ships went back to Littleton and we just had the occasional cruise ship in Akaroa.
But even the little boutique cruise ships would be all right.
Yeah, they're ideal.
But following on from that, with regards to the second slide of current tourism model is costing local livelihoods, that's right across the region at the moment, really, isn't it? It hasn't fully recovered from the earthquake. So when you talk about, you know, Akaroa is better suited for small boutique type activities, that's what you have, and it just seems with the slide, the second slide you have, with these, as you said, the boutiques closing down. Why is that?
Well, I think it's an interesting one because I've been looking at that, and I think it's happening without us kind of realising it. But I think tourism has actually picked up in Akaroa. We have a lot of tourism, but I think the problem is that it's outsourced from accommodation. People are either staying in their camper vans or they're staying in cruise ships. So we need that regulatory playing field to level things up again, to give our own small businesses a chance. So I think that's really what's going on with accommodation, and I think it's also down marketing at the moment. So we've had some of our higher quality shops closing, and I think there's a view from some people that because we are sort of so busy with the cruise ships on Sundays that our bigger spenders are actually staying away. So without any proper research and study, you're only going on opinion and hearsay, but I think there's certainly a multiplicity of views on where those benefits are lying, and I think a lot of the benefits from the cruise ships are the big bus companies and Transrail and things like that that are really pulling the punters.
Ali and then Phil.
Thank you. I just wondered, those you mentioned the bakery and a couple of other places in Akaroa. You know that they have closed as a result of there not being the business there, or are they related in some way to earthquake and insurance issues? Or I'm just trying.
Well, the bakery was a really strange one because that actually burnt down.
It burnt down. Yeah.
But I think what I see is that an accident happened to a business, but has somebody come along and taken the lease out on it? No, it's still sitting there looking for a lease. We've got a beautiful bed and breakfast in Ako, which has been completely restored after the earthquakes. It's sitting on the market. Nobody's coming to buy it. So it tells me that the demand isn't out there, for business. So I'm just observing that that's what's happening.
Phil.
Thank you very much, Suky. Can I just ask you, and I might have misunderstood this or not heard it clearly, but I inferred from what you were saying that besides having the Banks Peninsula as a distinct council ward, that there should also be 2 community boards, so that the community boards there should continue. Is that what you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, now in my role. In my personal role, I am much more involved with the Akaroa community. That is my community that I reside in. But in my role as the Rod Donald Trust Manager, I've been working equally with both community boards. And what I see is that both community boards are really busy with a lot of issues. So, I mean, Littleton has got its whole recovery, it's got the port, it's got the harbour, it's got Diamond Harbour. There's a lot going on. And I see people like Paula Smith, run off her feet managing just the Littleton Mount Herbert board. So I think to try and do the whole peninsula would be really difficult for the community board.
But if we did have to make a call around combining some, because again, the argument for a separate community board at the Littleton end does get more challenging, in terms of proximity, and doesn't have the geographic distance. And it's got a tunnel, so the hill argument doesn't quite, work as well. But would you rather see that community board combine with Akaroa Wairewa rather than the other way around? Definitely.
I think, in the peninsula, as I said, our hills, our water, we look inward. From the Littleton Crater, you look into the Littleton Crater. That's the community of interest, and I think when you look at that landscape up there, we are joined together, and we're only just beginning to really tap into the potential of the peninsula as a unified land, and that's the opportunity for Christchurch, is really to make something of the peninsula. So I think that if you do that, then you really have to make sure that community board meets in the different locations so that people can go and make their representations, and it will really need a lot of support, and we certainly don't want to see our independent service centres closing.
So Suky, another question I had too in relation to that was, you mentioned specifically about empowering and strengthening community boards, and the example I think you gave was the reserves fund that the Banks Peninsula boards have. I just wondered, because in fact after this review we are, as a council, we're going to be looking at, besides where the structures of community boards, what new delegations we may be able to support them with. I just wondered if you've got any suggestions around that additional factor, because you mentioned like the reserves fund that the Peninsula boards have. Have you got any suggestions from outside the boards as to what other delegations or areas that they might be able to be strengthened with?
So I was a community board member for the Akaroa Wairewa ward under Banks Peninsula, and I know the frustration of being a community board member, that you feel so helpless, that you keep having these meetings but you never really seem to get anything done. And certainly the one thing that we had was we had the right to determine what happened, or at least make strong advice about our reserves fund, so we could make the decisions as a local community board. We're going to spend, in fact, I think that was my proudest achievement as a community board member, was the steps up from the beach in Devosial to the Nio Point track, and we contracted basically, we controlled the contracting out of that. And I think that as a start, but I think when you've got the really remote ward like Akaroa, the local contracting that Andrew's been looking at can cover more than just parks and reserves. It could cover our public facilities as well. Put that back in the hands of the locals again, and all these grumbles about things don't even need to come to your table. They can be sorted out in a local community, and we can cost effectively supply those services.
Thank you. Indeed, it does sound a very good model. Thank you.
Andrew, last question.
So, Suky, thank you very much indeed for the excellent presentation. Would your view of either the Littleton Mount Herbert Community Board and Akaroa Wairewa Community Board as two separate entities, or the two community boards combined as one Banks Peninsula Community Board, would you see that, and do you think the community would see that as some kind of community council that was able to deal with a lot of peninsula issues that, to use your own words, wouldn't need to come near this table?
Yeah, I think if I feel like I'm a bit like being cross-examined by the lawyers here and end up in a corner, but I think it is definitely, we value as a community the ability to talk to a group of people who understand what we're talking about. So when we talk about something, what we're talking about on the community board. I think it'd be a big ask for a community board to run around that whole great big area. But if the flip side of it is that they're actually empowered to get on with the work, and they have that sense of we're actually doing something useful here, then I think we will attract more people to stand for the positions, and I think we'll get more able people standing for the positions. So I think we would win if we empowered our community boards. Whether we have one board or two, I think I will leave that to this forum to negotiate. My preference would still be that we had two. I mean, at the moment they do meet together for a combined meeting, so I think the Peninsula community boards have found their own way of going. Every now and again we have big Peninsula issues that we need to talk about, but a lot of the time we're dealing with, our own parochial issues. We don't need to waste the Littleton people's time talking about the toilets in Le Bons Bay,
Thank you.
Thank you. That's actually been incredibly helpful, and I just think the combined effect of all of the submissions that we've had today has certainly opened up our eyes to the range of issues that we need to take into account as we get to the notification point. So thank you very much. Really appreciate you making the effort to come and make the submission.
Thank you very much for your time, all of you, and also, you all have a very hard job now, so keep going.
Will do. All right, so I think I'll just adjourn the meeting until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.